What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. There is a moment in every collapsing system when the lies cannot cover the rot anymore, when stage parades, shiny recruitment ads, and patriotic speeches cannot disguise the fact that the machine behind the curtain is already coughing, sputtering, and devouring itself. Russia's military has now reached that moment. And we're not talking about some symbolic decline, but actual physical, measurable decay that has been already witnessed and confirmed by many different people. Like, for example, grenades filled with wood instead of explosives materials, or body armor stuffed with foam instead of Kevlar. You don't need to be a military analyst to understand that what that means. It means that the country that swore it was the second army in the world is now struggling not to become the second army in Ukraine. Or at least keep its status as the second army in Ukraine. And yet, while the Kremlin tries to paint this disaster as a heroic crusade, young men with pellet guns, 1940s rifles, or even 19th century rifles, expired rations, and children's walkie-talkies are being shouted to a modern battlefield that eats entire brigades before breakfast. But here's the real twist. Even this is not enough to convince the Russian government to treat its soldiers like actual human beings. Instead of raising standards, well, what they do, they lower bonuses. Instead of paying salaries on time, they delay them for months. Instead of offering contracts that respect human life, they bury recruits beneath mountains of bureaucracy designed to deny any compensation. And then, potential volunteers, even the most desperate ones, are finally starting to understand the truth. You can gamble your life for this regime, but the house still always wins. And you will likely lose everything, including, and most likely, your life. So today, let's dive deep into how Russia went from supposedly world-class military to hollowed-out spectacle powered by corruption, delusion, propaganda, and a population no longer willing to die for promises that evaporate the moment you just ink your name on a contract. Let's begin with the great illusion, the one Putin has been selling for 20 years and apparently started believing himself. The illusion that Russia is a towering military colossus capable of crushing Europe before dinner and then nuking the moon after dessert. This fantasy kinda worked as long as Moscow was not forced to actually fight anyone who could shoot back. Crimea in 2014 was their golden example, a near bloodless annexation that fed the myth of Russian dominance. But illusions only work until you do not peek behind the curtain. And in Ukraine, the curtain was not just gently lifted, it was violently torn off. And behind it, guess what? A military not just weakened, but rotted from decades of corruption. Soldiers opening crates expecting explosives and, just finding wooden blocks. Body armor that collapses like a cheap toy. Helmets from World War II wrapped in modern cover just to hide their age and rust. Tanks stuffed with rubber instead of real explosive armor. Medical kits replaced and, I did not believe it at first, but medical kits stuffed with tampons, not sterile ones, not tactical ones, just tampons. Well, at least not used ones, because, someone somewhere pocketed the money meant for actual first aid supplies. And, what, we are supposed to believe that this army was preparing for a real war? The Russian military did not simply decline, it was looted. Every ruble meant for modernization was stolen and invested into vacation homes, Swiss bank accounts, and super yachts so enormous and expensive, they make entire Russian region budgets look modest. The oligarch class got richer, obviously, the generals bought villas, and the regular soldiers, they just got cardboard armor. So when people ask how could Russia fall apart so quickly on the battlefield, the answer is pretty simple. Putin did not build a modern military. He built a Potemkin army, a giant cardboard cutout, impressive from the distance, but just hollow from up close and catastrophic once the real bullet starts flying. Propaganda tried to hide the devastation and it even kinda succeeded for a couple of years, but eventually truth always comes out. Let's talk about it in our next chapter. While the reality on the ground is drenched in mud, fear and drone shrapnel, Russian state TV is still airing recruitment ads that look like just low-budget fairy tales. Young men go to war, return home with luxury cars, shiny apartments, glowing ex-girlfriends begging for forgiveness, multiple of them. Middle-aged factory workers, just realize that they just walk away from their miserable jobs and magically turn their lives around by signing these contracts. Soldiers eating warm bread, barbecue, saunas in trenches, peace in artillery zones. There's prosperity in death. But, well, what's not in this video then? The tens of thousands of men who return home on a stretcher or in a sealed coffin, or, well, never returned at all. The soldiers filming videos begging their commanders for food because their rations expired 7 years ago. Well, I mean, the units were using walkie-talkies from Перекресток, which is, I don't know, Russian Walmart, instead of secure radios. The pilots who tape smartphones to their dashboards because their jets lack navigation systems just simply doesn't work. The missile crews launching rockets so inaccurate that they just sometimes boomerang back into Russian soil. I mean, you've heard these examples, not just once. But even these propaganda miracles are not working anymore. Why? Because the financial bait has changed. The giant signing bonuses, $40,000, $50,000, flash and irresistible, are shrinking. Delayed, sometimes never paid at all. The salaries that once was promised as monthly reward for bravery now show up late or not at all. The Ministry of Defense has mastered one art specifically and perfectly: inventing new bureaucratic obstacles to avoid paying the people who literally risk their lives for them. Potential volunteers obviously see this, as they talk to friends, cousins, neighbors of the dead. They hear about men who fought, died, and whose families received nothing: no bonus, no salary, no compensation, no nothing, not even a call of condolences. They hear about widows dragging themselves through military offices begging for benefits, only to be told that their husbands did not technically qualify because they did not die, in the special military operations zone somewhere else. And well, suddenly that shiny new car from the ad looks more like a scam flyer on a telephone pole. People are not joining anymore because, why die for money you will never receive from a regime that survives by stealing? Besides the financial scam itself, the attitude of military commanders towards their subordinates could not be worse. Men are seen as replaceable. And why not? Why not recruit thousands of them if you don't even have to pay them anyways? That's one of the biggest reasons why the losses of the Russian military are disproportionately enormous. You guys know about this already. But let's talk about it in more details in our next chapter. When the war began, Russian commanders lied to their own soldiers, telling them that they were going on just some kind of training exercises, checking documents, verifying address. And so what? Men crossed the border thinking they just spent a few days marching around fields, only to be greeted by Ukrainian artillery. Some did not even know where they were until they saw these welcome signs. The psychological preparation for war, motivation, mission clarity, ideological purpose simply did not exist. There was no why, only because we said so, so you just go. Well, and the result, obviously panic, desertion, chaos. As casualties climbed, Russia faced a problem it had never experienced on this scale: a total collapse of manpower. Entire regions had already been drained of fighting-age men during the first year of the invasion. Poor villages lost 50, 60, sometimes even 70% of their working-age male population. The Kremlin insisted cannot mobilize Moscow and St. Petersburg again, just too dangerous politically, but what about poor regions? Well, they are already emptied. So what do you do when propaganda stops working and people refuse to sign up voluntarily? You escalate. You force recruitments, street kidnappings, police knocking on doors at night, men being blackmailed, threatened, tricked, pressured, cornered. It's not mobilization, it's literally human trafficking dressed in camouflage. And even that is running into problems, believe it or not. Because every Russian now understands one single brutal truth: signing a military contract is not an agreement, it is a life sentence. Impossible to quit, impossible to modify, impossible to escape except through injury, arrest, or death. And even death does not guarantee your family will receive the money you're promised. The Kremlin used to rely on poverty to fill its ranks, on desperation. Well, now it relies on fear. But fear only works when people believe that they have something to lose. While more and more Russians have decided that the regime cannot give them anything absolutely worth dying for. To understand the decay of Russia's army, you must understand the system that built it. A system where corruption is not a bug, but it's a feature. A system where generals steal budget money and replace gear with wood, rubber, foam and lies. A system where maintenance crews sign off on tank repairs that, well, they never actually repaired. They just maybe reset the dashboard and that's it. A system where aircraft lack pilots because training is expensive and the cash disappeared long time ago. A system where a navy meant to project power ends up with one fire-prone carrier whose main companion is a tugboat. This is why Russia spent only $3.2 billion on new ships in 15 years, while its oligarchs spent $4.1 billion on personal yachts. And this had only confirmed. Russia does not invest in the army, Russia invests in illusions, and illusions always collapse. Putin made the same error that destroys every authoritarian ruler. He believed his own propaganda. He created it and then he believed it. He thought Ukraine would fall like Crimea did. He thought Europe would collapse under its own pressure. He thought NATO would hesitate. He thought his army was strong because he saw it on TV. He saw people saying things that he ordered them to say. Not because he checked the books, but inspected the equipment or questioned the generals who were robbing him blind. Well, what else? Now Russia is fighting with a modern war with ancient rifles, paper uniforms, broken logistics, starving soldiers, malfunctioning missiles, and tanks older than their own commanders, generations ago. The final insult: even if Russia had the equipment, it no longer has the men. The volunteers have dried up. The poor regions are already emptied. The bonuses are shrinking. The salaries are unreliable. The bureaucracy is weaponized to deny payments. And the last remaining Russians who might consider joining the army, well, they just know perfectly well. The regime will take your life, but never pay your family. Russia wanted to project power, but ended up exposing weakness. It wanted to inspire fear, but inspired skepticism. It wanted to create a heroic myth, but just produced an obituary for its own military. And now the Kremlin faces an unsolvable problem. How do you convince people to die for a system that will not even pay them for surviving? The glory is fake, the gear is fake, the promises are fake, and only one thing is real, brutally, unmistakably real. It is the number of men who went to Ukraine, believing they will come home richer, and instead came home in silence inside a wooden box, or not at all. Because in today's Russia, even death is more peaceful than trusting the promises of the regime. Well, there you have it, guys. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you wish to support our work, you can do so the best way by joining our Patreon. There's an additional chapter in the end of this specific episode and many more other. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow. We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe